Wyoming Territory, 1879. The wind cut sharp across the open plain as a woman with hollow cheeks and a torn shawl bent to pick a single potato from the frost-bitten dirt. Briar Prescott had not eaten in 2 days. Not since she gave the last bit of flour to her daughter, Fern, and boiled the last bone for her son, Fisher. The children, only 5 and 7, lay curled on a straw mattress behind the thin walls of their sod house. Her husband, Warren, had been dead 6 months. Fever took him fast one night and left her with 2 mouths to feed and a debt-ridden patch of land no man wanted. The neighbors had stopped coming by after the 3rd week. She had asked for help once and they had looked away. Today she was not begging. She was just walking. Her boots were cracked. Her fingers bled through the gloves she had stitched from Warren's old shirt. She pressed each step forward into the snow, not knowing where she was going, only that the cold would take her soon if she stayed still. The sun was halfway down the sky when she saw smoke, a thin trail rising from behind a stand of cottonwoods. Her legs moved without asking her permission. She came to a small spread, a cabin, a corral, a single horse tied near the door. No one came out. She knocked once, weakly, then again harder. The door opened. The man standing there was tall, broad across the chest, with a face weathered by sun and silence. Coal dark hair curled beneath his hat, and a rifle hung behind the door. His eyes locked on hers, and something in them shifted, not pity, not fear, just quiet understanding. "I ain't got anything to steal," Briar said. Her voice cracked. "But I got 2 children back that way, and they are starving." The man looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. "You will not find charity here," he said. "Just food. For as long as you need it." She stepped in. The door shut behind her. His name was Elias Judd. He lived alone, raised cattle, and spoke little. He gave her water first, then a plate of beans and cornbread she could barely hold steady in her hands. He watched her eat without saying a word. That night, she slept on a cot by the fire. He gave her his coat and sat near the door, cleaning his rifle with methodical care. The next morning he hitched up his wagon. She showed him the way. Her hands trembled as she lifted Fisher into the wagon bed. Elias carried Fern himself, wrapping her in a spare blanket. Back at the cabin, he cleared out the storage room. It had been filled with tools and sacks of feed. By sunset, it held 2 small beds, a stack of folded quilts, and a chipped tin cup for each of them. Briar stood in the doorway, not knowing what to say. "You do not owe me," Elias said. "You needed help. That is all." But it was not all. Not to her. The children took to him fast. Fisher shadowed him in the mornings, pretending to fix saddle straps and feed the chickens. Fern was slower, more shy, but she smiled when Elias carved her a wooden horse and called it Clover. Briar worked. She could not sit idle under another's roof. She baked, mended, swept, and cut wood until her palms blistered. Elias never stopped her, but he always left half the woodpile for her to finish, and never once told her what to do. One evening, after the children had gone to sleep, she found him outside, sitting on the porch with a tin cup of coffee. She sat beside him without asking. "You do not talk much," she said. He glanced at her. "Words do not fix hunger." "No," she said, "but they can mean something." They sat in quiet for a time. The sky was wide and filled with stars. The wind had gone still. "I buried Warren out behind the house," Briar said. "I thought I would die there too." Elias did not move, but his voice was low and sure. "You did not." She looked down at her hands. "I do not know what comes next." He turned toward her. "You are fed. Your children are safe. That is enough for now." But it was not enough, not anymore. Something had changed in her. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled her. She watched the way Elias moved through the day, steady, quiet, firm. She watched the way he waited for Fern to speak first each morning, and how he let Fisher fall asleep on his shoulder after supper. And slowly, she began to breathe again. One night, she brought out a small tin of tea she had hidden at the bottom of her bag. Warren had bought it for her before he died. She steeped 2 cups and brought one to Elias, who sat by the fire mending a saddle strap. He took it, touching her fingers just briefly as he did. "Thank you," he said. She sat across from him. "You shared your table," she said. "And more than that." He looked at her then, really looked. "You are not a burden, Briar." Her eyes stung. "You are not alone anymore," he said. Neither of them moved. The fire crackled low. The children breathed softly in the other room. She reached across the table, took his hand. His fingers curled around hers. Solid, warm. Elias Judd, who had opened his door to a stranger, had done more than feed her body. He had seen her, and now, with her hand in his, Briar Prescott felt something she had not known in a long time. Hope, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of love. The spring thaw came slow that year, reluctant and gray. Snow melted in patches, leaving the earth slick and heavy underfoot. Briar woke early, before the rooster, warmed by the steady rhythm of Fern's breath against her side and the muffled sound of Elias splitting wood just beyond the wall. She rose without waking the children, pulled on her skirt and shawl and stepped outside. The sky above the cabin was pale with morning. Elias stood near the chopping block, sleeves rolled, steam rising faint off his shoulders. He paused when he saw her. "You sleep much?" she asked, brushing a curl from her face. "Some," he said, setting the axe aside. "You? Enough." He glanced toward the barn. "Got a calf come early. Small thing but strong. Might be worth keeping for milk if she holds on." Briar nodded. "I'll bring her some mash later." They moved together toward the barn. He didn't offer help and she didn't ask for it. Inside, the air was warmer, thick with the smell of straw and livestock. A new calf blinked up from its corner stall, limbs folded awkwardly beneath it. Elias leaned on the rail. "Fern's been drawing again," Briar said, brushing hay from her skirt. "Fisher said she made him a picture of a bear chasing a wagon. She said it's supposed to be me in the wagon." Briar's mouth twitched upward. "Said the bear had your eyes. She's sharper than she lets on," Elias said, watching the calf shift. Briar looked at him sidelong. "You didn't flinch when I first showed up. Most men would have shut the door." He didn't answer right away. The calf gave a soft, wet bleat. "I was raised by a woman who took in anyone who showed up hungry," Elias said finally. "Didn't matter if they had a name or not." Briar leaned her arms on the stall's edge. "She's still living?" "No. Died when I was 20. Pneumonia got her in October." "I'm sorry." He nodded once. "She used to say the land don't belong to us. We borrow it. Same with kindness." Briar let that settle. "Warren used to say people only help when they've got something to gain." Elias met her eyes. He wasn't wrong, but he wasn't right either. Outside, the wind shifted. A hawk circled overhead. Later that week, Briar found herself pacing the edge of the field with a basket in hand, testing the dirt with her heel. Elias came up behind her carrying fence wire. "You thinking of planting?" he asked. "If the soil holds," she said. "I've got half a sack of beans and some corn I kept wrapped in paper. Could stretch it. I'll clear the back acre for you." "I didn't ask." "I didn't say you did." The corner of her mouth lifted again, but she let it go. That night, Elias brought out a fiddle. It was worn and missing a string, but he tuned it carefully by the fire while Briar sewed a patch onto Fisher's trousers. "You play?" she asked, surprised. "When I can." He coaxed a slow, aching tune from it, one that made Fern look up from her drawing and Fisher stop mid-yawn. Briar didn't recognize the melody, but it filled the room like warm bread. "Where'd you learn?" she asked after he set it down. "Army days," he said. "There was a man from Georgia. Said it kept his hands from going stiff." "Did it help you too?" "Some." Briar reached for the hem of her skirt, fingers working the fabric. "I used to sing when I was a girl. My mother taught me hymns before she passed. I forgot most of them. You remember any?" "Bits," she said, voice low. Elias leaned back, gaze steady. "You ever want to sing again, you can." She looked up. "Would you listen?" He didn't hesitate. "Always." The next morning, Briar found a spool of blue thread on the table, beside a folded scrap of muslin. She hadn't asked for it. He didn't mention it. A week later, while hauling water, Briar slipped on a patch of thawed mud and scraped her knee. Elias heard the fall and was at her side before she could stand. He didn't ask if she was all right. He just knelt and pressed a hand against her shin, inspecting it. "You'll bruise." "I've bruised worse," she said, breath quick. He looked up. "Doesn't mean you should have to keep doing it." She reached out without thinking, brushing his cheekbone with her thumb. There was a scar just below his eye she hadn't noticed before, a thin line. Old. He didn't pull away. Something settled between them then. Not sudden, not spoken, but solid. Like the earth after rain, full of things waiting to grow. That night, Briar stayed awake long after the children had gone quiet. She stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself, watching Elias walk the fence line with a lantern in hand. When he returned to the porch and looked up, she didn't step away. She knew what came next wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the work it would take. She had a man who saw her, and she would stand beside him come whatever might. The 1st of May brought green to the cottonwoods and a softer light to the mornings. The ground, though still damp in places, had firmed enough for planting, and Briar moved through the back acre with dirt under her nails and a sun hat Elias had left on the peg beside the door. He hadn't said it was hers, but no one else reached for it. Elias worked beside her that day, turning the soil with a quiet steadiness that made the hours pass without hurry. Fern sat nearby on a quilt with a book Briar had stitched together from scrap paper and old seed catalogs, while Fisher dug a trench for the beans with a stick he insisted was a real plow. "You've got patience," Briar said, straightening to stretch her back. Elias glanced at her from beneath the brim of his hat. "I've learned what happens when you don't." She pushed a stray wisp of hair from her temple. "What did you learn it from?" "A man I fought beside at Vicksburg. He rushed every shot, lost half his hearing from firing too close. After that, he sat still for everything. Even meals." "You fought in the war?" 3 years. Cavalry mostly." She studied his face. "You don't carry yourself like a man looking for fights." "I'm not." "What do you carry, then?" He hesitated, eyes fixed on the dark soil between their boots. "Regret. Some of it not mine, but it sticks just the same." Briar crouched to press another seed into the earth. "I know what that feels like." They didn't speak for a while after that. Wind moved through the grass, and the sky turned a deeper blue. When Fisher began to nod off in the sun, Elias lifted him without comment and carried him inside, returning a few minutes later with a jug of water and 2 tin cups. "You ever think of leaving this place?" Briar asked, accepting the cup. "Not since I built the cabin." "Why here?" "I passed through after the surrender. The land was rough but honest. Felt like I owed something to that." She took a sip. "I thought about leaving after Warren died. Thought maybe we'd head east. But I didn't know anyone. Didn't have anything to offer." "You've got more than most." She looked up. "You barely knew me when you said I could stay." "I didn't need to." He stood, brushing dirt from his trousers. She followed him back to the house, where the children had curled up on the rug near the hearth. The smell of coffee lingered from earlier, and the day's warmth had settled into the walls. That evening, Briar found Elias outside, oiling the hinges on the barn door. She brought out a plate of fried potatoes and the last of the smoked salt pork, wrapped in a clean cloth. "Thought you might be hungry," she said. "I am." He set the tools aside and sat on the stoop. She joined him, passing the plate into his hands. "I used to think I had to earn every kindness," she said. He chewed, then swallowed. "You don't. I still feel like I do. Then let me be the one to remind you." They sat in silence, watching the stars blink into the sky. Somewhere out on the plain, a coyote called once and went quiet. After a while, she touched his wrist. "I don't know what this is, Elias, but I haven't felt it before. Not like this." He turned his hand to meet hers. "You don't need to name it yet." She leaned into his shoulder. "I don't want to lose it, whatever it is." "You won't." Inside, the children stirred in their sleep. The lamp still burned low in the front room, casting long shadows on the floor. Elias wrapped his hand around hers, steady and sure. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, and she believed him. By late June, the fields had taken root and the cabin's walls held the scent of sun-warmed pine. Briar's hands were calloused, her arms stronger than they'd ever been. The ache of survival had given way to the rhythm of living, and every evening brought the quiet satisfaction of a day honestly spent. Elias had built a chicken coop near the fence line, and when dusk fell, Briar would gather the eggs while Fern scattered feed with her small, deliberate steps. Fisher had taken to hammering scrap wood into odd shapes, claiming he was building a wagon of his own. One morning, Elias returned from the trading post with a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. He laid it on the table beside the bread Briar had pulled from the oven. "You been needing something better than that kettle," he said, unwrapping a cast-iron Dutch oven. Briar traced the handle with her fingers. "How much did this cost you?" "Traded the last of my elk hides and a set of horseshoes." "You shouldn't. I don't trade for things I don't want to give." She didn't answer, but her hands lingered on the pot long after he stepped outside. That afternoon, she baked a cobbler with the last of the dried plums she'd been saving since before winter. When she carried it out to the porch, Elias was sharpening his knife, elbow resting on his knee. "I figured a man who brings a gift deserves something sweet," she said, setting the dish down beside him. He looked at it, then at her. "That for me, unless you want to split it with the hens." He cut a piece and handed it to her first. She took it, still warm, and sat down beside him. "You ever miss the places you used to be?" she asked. He didn't look away from the horizon. "Sometimes, but I've never wanted to go back." "You ever think about having a family before this?" "Once. Long time ago. She married someone else while I was away." Briar let that settle. "I suppose I was someone's second choice too." He turned toward her, slow. "That what you think this is?" "I don't know what this is, but it's not what I had before." Warren was kind in his way, but he never looked at me like I had a mind of my own. "You've got more than a mind. You've got a spine, and a heart worth staying for." Her breath caught in her chest. "You stayed for me?" "I stayed because I wanted to. You just gave me reason." She set the half-eaten plate aside and folded her hands in her lap. "I never thought I'd want to belong anywhere again." "You don't have to belong to a place," he said. "You can belong to a life." The sun dipped lower, light catching in the curls that had come loose near her ear. Elias reached up and tucked one behind her cheek. His hand lingered, callous thumb brushing the edge of her jaw. "I ain't asking for an answer tonight," he said. "But when you're ready, I want you to know this isn't just shelter. Not for me." Briar laid her hand against his chest, feeling the slow, steady beat beneath his shirt. I don't want to sleep in the back room anymore. Elias didn't move, just searched her face. You sure? I haven't been unsure since the day you carried Fern to the wagon. He stood and held out his hand. She let him pull her to her feet. That night, after the children had been tucked in, after the fire had burned low, they lay beneath the quilt she had pieced together with her own hands. No promises were spoken, none needed. He held her like a man who had waited longer than he ever admitted, and she touched him like someone who had forgotten what safety felt like, and was learning it again one breath at a time. Outside, the wind rustled the cottonwoods, and the stars watched in silence. Inside, a woman who had once been left to starve found herself fed in every way that mattered. And the man who had shared his table now shared his soul. The wheat came in taller than Elias expected. By mid-July, the heads swayed gold in the breeze, and Briar walked the rows with her skirts gathered, checking for worm rot and wind damage. Fern and Fisher had taken to spending afternoons beneath the cottonwoods with Elias's old field journal, drawing pictures of the animals they saw. Sometimes they brought her leaves folded into pretend letters, and she'd tuck them into the apron pocket without reading, just to keep them close. They were 3 months into the new life now, and nothing felt borrowed anymore. She stood on the porch one evening while Elias mended the cinch strap on the mare's saddle. The light was soft, the kind that made everything look gentler. He worked without glancing up, but his voice carried easily. I've been thinking about building a second barn, something small, for tools and storage. Maybe a smokehouse too. She leaned a shoulder against the post. You planning to do it alone? No. I was figuring on asking my wife to help me. Her heart stilled for a second. Is that a question, Elias? He set the strap down and looked over at her. I don't figure I've ever been good at asking things the right way. But I'd like you to marry me, Briar. Not for thanks. Not to make anything proper. Just because I want to wake up beside you for the rest of my days. She stepped down from the porch. Her hands were dusty from the field, and her throat tightened in a way that had nothing to do with tears. I never thought I'd be asked again, she said softly. And I never thought I'd want to say yes this much. He reached for her hand, holding it like something sacred. You'll have the children and you'll have me, she said. We're a whole, Elias, not parts. He nodded, voice rough. That's all I've ever wanted. They were married 2 weeks later, standing beneath the cottonwoods with the children holding wildflowers and the wind warm against their faces. A traveling preacher passed through with a mule cart and read the vows from a Bible so worn the cover had peeled. Elias said them like a man who'd waded through storms, and Briar answered with a voice that didn't shake once. Fern wore a ribbon in her hair that Briar had saved from her girlhood trunk. Fisher carried the rings in a tobacco tin. After the preacher left, they ate biscuits and dried apples under the trees, and Briar kissed Elias's cheek in front of everyone. Just once, gentle and sure. That night, with the door locked and the lantern turned low, she lay against him, her hand resting over his heart. You really never thought about leaving this place? She whispered. Not once you were here. She looked up at him. What made you open that door the day I knocked? He ran his thumb along her wrist, thoughtful. There was something in your eyes. Not fear exactly. Not need. Just a kind of strength I recognized. She touched his jaw, tracing the edge of his stubble. I didn't feel strong. You were. You still are. Outside, the wind rustled the wheat fields. Inside, Elias kissed her slowly, like he had all the time in the world and nothing to prove. The seasons turned. The wheat was harvested, the beans shelled, the corn stored in sacks, Briar stitched tight. The second barn was built with hands blistered from effort and a roof that held through the first hard rain. Fisher started asking questions about maps and wagon routes, and Elias taught him how to read the compass in his field journal. Fern learned to hum while she worked, small tunes that filled the kitchen with quiet joy. On a cold morning in late November, the first snow fell. Briar stood at the window holding a steaming mug, watching the flakes gather on the sill. Elias came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You warm enough?" he asked. She leaned back into him. "Always." He kissed the top of her head and stayed there, breathing her in. They lived the years that followed in the same quiet way. Planting, raising, teaching, loving. No one wrote books about them. No one came asking for stories. But the life they built together, honest and enduring, became the kind people could feel when they walked the land. And on every cold morning, Briar still found herself watching the snow through the window, safe in a home where she was wanted, known, and loved. They grew old in that cabin near the cottonwoods. The children grew too, and when they left, they did so with full bellies and roots that ran deep. Elias and Briar remained. And they were happy.